Hey everybody, welcome to the Patty G Show. We are back for another great episode. This week we're going to the farm, but we're going to a farm in Baton Rouge, probably about 15-20 minutes south of LSU. There's a great little farm called Willow Creek Ranch. Owners Jeremy and Amié do phenomenal circular farming with their pastures and their crops and their animals and really get into the science of things. So we had a blast talking about all things farming. Got to share a little farming stories back and forth. So really great stuff up ahead. And before we get to that episode, however, I want to give a big, wonderful shout out and thank you to the folks that bring you this show each and every week. We couldn't do it without them. Those amazing partners are Falia Real Estate, Lakeman's Health Center, Horizon Financial Group, and Gage. Without further ado, enjoy the show.
So it kind of started this journey of just learning for me. I really didn't know really what like organic was, honestly, before. I just really didn't pay that much attention to it. She always bought organic foods, and she was very, health conscious from that standpoint. So I started digging into that, learning about that. Stuff that they don't teach you in medical school. So that's my background, but it wasn't anything that I ever had been taught or learned. And it's all started kind of clicking for me. And I met people like Grant at, Fullness Farm and started asking them questions. I read a ton. So we ended up, I think we started with pigs first. So we kind of we really bought in once I saw the literature for the nutrient density of foods raised this way. And it made sense to me. I'm like, all right, we're going to do this, And so we started with pigs that, now we have a huge, herd of pigs, or a lot more than we did when we started.
I was going to say, did you learn the hard way about the speediness of the reproductions for pigs?
Oh my gosh. It's like, where did all these pigs come from all of a sudden? They also, we've had different animals. Pigs are pretty good at getting out of stuff. So we had to deal with that. My neighbor sent me a picture one day of him walking one of our pigs back over on the leash, and we're very rural. So they're kind of far down the road, but the pig had escaped, and they just brought it back over to the house, So we kind of learned, and we grew kind of slowly and organically. But I think really seeing the science behind it is what kind of started it for me. And then we just really kind of went all in. We said, hey, this is a good opportunity to be good stewards of the land, do something that we believe in, teach our kids the value of hard work and chores, and also kind of how to run a business and do something that matters and is, helping people. So that's how it started.
I love it. So how are the chickens doing now?
Well, those are the hardest, I think, to keep alive. There are a lot of predators out there that love a good chicken. So about a year ago, last summer, we bought Roxy, our big white Akbash dog. We got her from a farm in Virginia because the foxes, 2 houses down, a family of foxes settled in, and they wiped out our flock twice. And we were keeping one flock in a chicken tractor and moving the chicken tractor every day. And I was just like, Jeremy, I really miss my chickens running around. Like, when you're having a bad day, just to go watch the chickens run, they're pretty funny, and it's relaxing. And so he was like, well, start looking into different breeds of dogs and stuff. But still, I mean, chicken hawks, the chickens are the hardest. Between the predators and then our youngest cracking all the eggs when he's going to harvest them on his way back up, the eggs are pretty hard for me.
Yeah, the first time I took my son out to my parents' farm, my dad had the bucket of eggs in the kitchen, and before we could move the egg bucket, I think he had somehow managed to grab 4 eggs and just dropped them all on the floor. And we were like, well, all right, there's the eggs gone.
Yes, just last night, I told him it was his turn to do the chickens, and I was like, go get the eggs. And I'm out there cleaning out one of our side-by-side vehicles, and I'm watching him ride his bike, and he's riding up this little hill from the pasture with the bucket dangling, just got all the eggs, and he just falls and completely wipes out. And there goes the bucket, and we've got yolk all over the place, and I'm just like, okay. I was probably about 2 dozen worth of eggs.
We have had so many conversations with him, like, Jacob, you can't crack all the eggs, you know, like, we're selling these eggs, they're accounted for, people, like, you have to be careful. He's like, okay, I got it this time, Dad, you know? We've changed buckets, we've changed, like, you know.
You mean like a lid bucket or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need, like, transportation modality, like, it started off walking, and then he would trip, and then it was the 4-wheeler, and it's like now he's on his bike. I mean, it's just like a never-ending saga. When his sisters bring the eggs back, we get all the eggs. But when it's his day, it's hit or miss.
You never know.
Maybe he needs a different job on the farm.
I know. Yeah, he may be banned from that at some point. Yeah, we do. So we have 3 kids, and they all rotate chores. So
Love that.
Amié has a chore chart for
I
them.
cycle it through.
And they, like, wake up in the morning. I mean, they'll be up at 5 o'clock in the morning. We don't ask them to do that, but they know they have to get their chore done. They'd rather get it done before school. So it's still dark. You'll see, you know, all of them, or sometimes just 2 of them at a time. They'll get up. They'll go look at the thing, see what their chore is, and just go take care of business. And I think it was a while before they recognized or realized that that's not what every kid does, you know? It was just so normal to them for the last several years. And I think when they talk to their friends, they're like, oh, y'all don't get up at 5 in the morning and, you know, go check on the pigs?
You all don't have all these animals that you got to go take care of? Like,
Exactly.
what do you do in the morning then?
So the word's getting out that maybe that's not, you know, what everybody does. But it's been good, you know, and I think it's helped them appreciate food and where it comes from, and just learning, like, some discipline and, you know, and how business works and all those types of things too. So,
Well, 2 of them, our middle child and our youngest, both say that they want to farm when they get older. Like, Jacob will ask, can I have this when y'all are done with it? Can I buy it from y'all when y'all are done with it? And Brielle always talks about, I just want to farm with lots of animals, with different dogs. And so they enjoy it. They have fun with it.
Yeah, it's a different way of living, and you always got something to do.
Yes.
And you're always interacting with another creature, which can be fun.
Yes.
yeah, Brielle, our middle daughter, like, if you can't find her when it's time to go to school in the morning, she's probably sitting out in the pasture somewhere, like, sitting with one of the animals. I mean, she just loves it out there.
She will take a book and go read to the pigs or the chickens.
Yeah.
She has nursed several chickens back to health.
Yep.
Like, pulled them in, you know, and they hurt their leg or something. She has nursed several of them back to health. She is living her best life out there.
She had one that she named
She
named Laura. She named the chicken Laura. Laura was close to death, you know, wasn't going to make it. We told Brielle it's not even worth, you know, keeping up. She nursed this chicken back to health. That chicken would see her drive up and come, like, running across the pasture to see her.
No way.
And so every egg that she laid, Brielle would draw a heart on the bottom of the egg with a pencil.
My.
And so if you ever got, you know, a dozen eggs from us, you would know which one were Laura's eggs because of that pencil. So she's just loving that, and, you know, really, really fits in well in that scenario.
Well, and then the farming kind of gives the kids a sense of pride and a sense of joy and, like, this feeling of accomplishment, because I'm sure when she nursed Laura back to health, it's like, I saved this bird, and now she's producing eggs once again. Like, this is incredible to see, and it's just like this whole other side of life that not everybody gets to experience, and when you do, you realize, what, this is pretty cool.
It is. I'm very thankful that we're able to offer our kids that.
Yeah, we've had some conversations, some tough conversations. You know, I remember the first pigs that we harvested, you know. The kids were just in love with the pigs, out there every day feeding them and stuff. And, you know, so you get close to these animals. And we would try to tell them from the beginning, you know, be real clear and transparent about, hey, this is how this works. And but it still is tough, especially that first time around. But I think that they understand that now, and I think they probably value, like, food and where those things come from a lot better now. But so there's been some life lessons that have come out of that too.
Yeah, that's always the hard part when it goes to the harvest. You know, we used to raise, my parents still do raise chickens for meat. They raise rabbits for meat. And we, at one point in time, were raising they still raise cattle and all that stuff. And the harvest time, so my mom would never be a part of. She said, I'm just going to leave the house when y'all do all that stuff. And then we'll come back, and she eats all of it and loves it all. She's like, I just don't want to be involved. But, you know, it's a process. And, you know, we grew up as hunters and fishers, so for us it wasn't that big of a change. But if it's your first realization when you're holding a little baby pig, and then however long later it gets to full size, like, wait, now I got to let him go. And so from the get-go, my dad would just, every year we do a turkey for our family, Thanksgiving or Christmas, and he just names it Christmas. So it's like, no, every year it's just we're gonna go and check on Christmas, and then we're gonna have Christmas for dinner.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, there you go.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that I think the farm has helped too, probably all of us, but definitely the kids learn how to cope a little bit, because we talked a little bit about the chickens, and but there's a lot of predators. Like, you get to witness nature up close, not always under your own terms or what you wanted to happen. And so if we've experienced that loss, or things don't go the way we want it to, or there have been some chickens or some animals that they nursed that didn't make it, And so I think also just learning some of those life lessons, and like how to cope with situations that don't necessarily go the way that you want them to. And it's been tough for all of us, but also good, I think.
Yeah, it builds that level of character and the realization that things aren't permanent and things aren't always going to be good.
That's right.
And it's how do you work through those emotions? This animal was so attached and loving, and now it's gone. Like, there's a reason the Saints, they go away to the farm, because at the farm they leave.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
They don't always come back. So having that, at least I know from me, it's that element where you recognize and you can appreciate things when you have it, and then you understand when it's gone, that it's like, okay, that was just part of being life.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. And animal husbandry, the importance of being a good steward, and what we get back from the animal, at the end, when we do care for that animal the way that, we're supposed to.
Yeah, we talk a lot about like respecting the animals and respecting the land, and one of the things that when we first moved out there that we talked about, and we didn't really see exactly how this thing was going to turn out, but we had some ideas, but we wanted to basically be good stewards of the land, be good stewards of the environment. It was something that mattered to us. And so as we started looking into, the different aspects of how we were going to, raise this animal or this animal, and we really didn't start out planning to do things organically or do like all grass-fed beef, grass-finished beef. Like, that wasn't really, like I said, I did not have much of a background in that. But as we learn more about how it affects like human health, but also like how it affects the environment, and the wildlife and things, it made a lot of sense. And so we talk with the kids a lot about that. It's like, hey, we have use for this land, and that's a great thing, but we want to leave it better than when we found it, and we want to provide habitat for all these animals. And there's a guy, there's a place, White Oak Pastures in Georgia, and so the farmer that runs that, he talks about sometimes like predators kind of just being like a nature tax, like a wildlife tax, and you're trying to live in harmony with wildlife. And so we never do want to lose chickens, and we take a lot of steps with our livestock dogs to protect them, but we recognize that, hey, we're trying to live in harmony with all of the other animals out here too, and so sometimes those things are going to happen, and that's part of being out there. Yeah.
So as far as the predators go, y'all kind of just let them interact with the animals and kind of have nature run its course.
We do things like we try to be intentional about protecting the animals, and so but we don't have any like large scale go out there and kill the predators strategies, which some farms do, and I think there's different strategies that people use to deal with that. We have a livestock guardian dog that that we got from Virginia, and she is kind of inherently, like, her instinct is, she's nice to people and all those types of things, but her instinct is to protect her flock. Right. And so she's out there with the pigs and the chickens every day. And there are still some, sometimes that she can't patrol the whole property, 100% of the time, but she does a good job, and it's really cut back on the animals being affected by predators. But we know that there's going to be some degree, especially sometimes when the animal's older and weaker and things like that. And I think that's part of how nature responds to
part
that,
of your time's up.
Yeah.
The healthy ones can kind of run and find cover, but the older ones, like, well, your time was done here.
Yep. And so, and we have those conversations with the kids as well. But Roxy actually does a phenomenal job of, you do have to have your head on a swivel out there. I never realized how you get some chickens and some livestock out there, the predators come out of nowhere. And so there's hawks, there's coyotes, there's foxes, and she does a pretty good job of fending most of them off. But there's still some they could buy.
Imagine taxiing on a plane looking toward the end of the runway. It seems so far away, it's even hard to see it. And that's what the concept of retirement probably felt like when you were in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, way far in the distance, not visible or even a concern. But as you turn 50, something happens. Retirement suddenly seems like something real, something not too far away. In your 50s, you are rolling down the runway. Retirement is getting closer and closer, faster and faster, weeks and months zipping by. But are you even ready for a successful takeoff to retirement? Fear not, there's still runway left. But the time is now. Time to make progress and time to get a plan. The Runway Decade will help you get organized, get energized, and give you the direction you need to take off to your desired retirement. The Runway Decade, building a pre-retirement flight plan in your 50s.
So y'all have cattle and pigs, right?
Yes.
So, and then for the cattle, when it's, birthing season, that's the most, got to have your head on your swivel at that point in time.
And we are currently not doing cow-calf. So
Okay.
the farm next to us does. So we're buying them as calves. And so usually when they get to us, they're weaned or close to it. And we haven't had to, deal with as much of that. But the pigs, yes, with the pigs. When we have baby piglets out there, it's a different ballgame for a couple of months until they get big enough to kind of protect themselves. We do, a lot of, conventionally, a lot of farming, they'll separate the boar from the piglets and all those types of things, and we don't. So
Okay.
Our piglets are raised in pasture. We rotate them around, but also in our woods. And so we're trying to kind of raise them in a natural environment. And we went back and forth. We read a lot of different things. There's a lot of opinions on it, and I think conventional farmers would tell you, you've got to separate the boar because he'll kill the piglets and those types of things. But we really kind of stuck with wanting to do it more natural and have the whole herd of pigs together. And so the boar is actually pretty protective,
Okay.
So we haven't had much piglet loss, if any, especially recently, because most animals don't want to deal with a big boar that's hanging out there. So he's pretty relaxed and lays around most of the day, but if he sees something he doesn't like, he'll get up and he's pretty intimidating. So I think that has helped too.
So, and what breed are the pigs?
Kune pigs.
Okay.
So smaller, real hairy, came from New Zealand. We went with that breed of pigs because they do better on pasture and eating kind of more natural forages. So we still give them grain, we give them organic feed that we supplement it with, but they're able to get some of their amino acids actually out of the forage, and that's kind of what we were looking for.
So where y'all are at in Baton Rouge, are y'all infested with wild pigs?
We are not,
Y'all are
fortunately.
fortunate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because about
Yeah.
20 miles down the river towards White Castle
everywhere.
and towards Sunshine, they're everywhere.
That's what we fortunately, all on our side, we haven't had any, and our neighbors haven't seen them. I'm sure it's just a matter of time though.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of taking over the state. And then my neighbors have told me that raise cattle and they don't raise pigs. They're like, hey, you can't let these things breed with wild hogs and create some
Right,
kind of
and that's
monster.
that's what I'm getting at.
yeah.
Like when you have the wild hogs come into the picture, unfortunately y'all don't. Like it changes the whole scene of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have to figure out how to deal with that when that.
When that time comes, that'll be a whole nother thing. But it was really sweet. I'll never forget the first litter of piglets that we had. We were super nervous about it. It's hard to know when the mama's going to drop the babies. And like he said, we went back and forth and back and forth. And I did not grow up on a farm, nor with pigs. So the only thing in my mind I could think of was like cats and how you don't want the male cat around the baby kittens.
Right.
So I was really concerned. And it was so sweet when we found them. The adults had formed this like a circle around the mama and the babies to like protect. They were just instinctively protecting. I was like, Jeremy, this is the sweetest thing. It's like their own little village.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And we had a lot of anxiety leading into it because, we're fortunate we have awesome neighbors that have farming experience. And, we have a farmer right down the road, Mr. Pete, that has been raising cattle forever, and I can call him 24/7 and lean on him for knowledge, and he's always checking in. And so we'd been back and forth, like, what do we do? And I had seen and read about examples of this specific breed of pigs being able to birth okay, out in the pasture and everything, but you never know. And then you start reading some stuff or talking to some people, and you're worried it's not going to go good. But it did. It went really well. We've had several litters now, and that's kind of the method that we've been doing, is just letting the whole kind of herd protect each other. And so far, they've been doing pretty good.
So how much research went into deciding what pig breed? Because at one point I wanted to do like American guinea pigs.
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah.
I heard that they've got a great meat content, and I was like looking at land to buy and everything. So I'm curious on your end, how much research went into choosing this specific breed? Because it sounds like they are very much more family and herd centered, just naturally.
Yeah, I mean, Amié will tell
He's
you.
the mastermind behind all the research.
I will deep dive into
People deep dive like
something.
nobody's business.
And so, I really went all in and tried to absorb as much information as I could. Read a lot, talked to a ton of people. I think there's pros and cons with any breed, and I recognize there's not going to be a perfect breed, and we may not always raise the same exact breed we do now. But I was looking for something family friendly, which they are. They're almost, if you spend time with them, they're almost like a dog. They'll follow you around. I mean, it's really cool. We knew that we wanted to share that experience with other people, so we wanted people on the farm. And so we didn't want pigs that we were worried about people's safety. We wanted them to be docile. And then the big thing was, when we really looked into it, is instead of putting them in a conventional setup and just only feeding them grain, we really wanted to have them rotating through the pasture, because we use them. They're kind of natural tillers. Like if you want to replant something, you can put them in there, till it up. They fertilize it very well, and then a couple of months later, that pasture is like growing better than any other part of the pasture. So we rotate all of the animals through: the cattle, the pigs, and the chickens. So we knew we wanted to do that. The downside is they're pretty slow growing, and they don't get as big as like traditional pigs. So they take a while to get ready, about 18 to 24 months, which is a while.
Yeah.
But we read a ton, researched a ton, and then, at some point you just kind of have to take the plunge and like just go with it. And so we did, and we've been happy with them. They grow slow enough that it just doesn't get out of control. And then they're nice enough that if they get out of the pasture, if you walk by with a feed bucket, they'll follow you all the way back, to where they need to be. So, yes, it's been good. And they're more of a lard pig, so they have more lard on them, which is good for cooking and things like that. So, it's been interesting to kind of learn the ins and outs. Trial and error a little bit.
I was about to say, I'm sure for the first harvest of the pigs, did y'all do it yourselves, or did you already have an established relationship with a local butcher or somebody to handle it for you?
Yes, I will not be butchering any animal myself. No, we use a abattoir in not far from here, so we usually load up the animal in a trailer and bring them out that way.
Yeah, when we started, there's different kind of federal and state laws around that. And so when we started, we did it in a way that we would basically sell the animal to somebody is basically a live animal sale. So, a customer will put a deposit down, and you think you kind of, you give them a guideline. I think it's going to be ready in October or whenever. It's a little bit of an art. It's not a perfect science. But when they're ready, you let the customer know. The customer purchases that. And then we're allowed in that setting to take it to the processor for them, but they have to deal with the processor and tell them the types of cuts and all those types of things, and that's a separate transaction. We recently got approved, though, for our own beef label through the state, and so now we're able to sell, individual cuts of meat. We're able to sell portions of an animal, and we deal with the processor that we take over there. But then that way, like, our customer doesn't have to go through the hassle of calling an additional person and all that. So we try to make it a little bit more seamless. So it's a bit of a process to get state approved, but it's been good, and the state inspectors are out there and check everything during the process and all that. So that's been exciting. It was a proud moment as a parent when these cattle that we've been raising, and we move the cattle every day. So we rotate them every single day to a new strip, sometimes multiple times a day. So the whole family helps with that because it kind of depends on like who's free at what time of the day. So a lot of work goes into that. So the first one that we processed under the state label, to go pick that up and bring that back, and the kids helped me unload it and put it all in the freezer, and it's got our own label on there. And so that was pretty special. They were pretty happy about it too, and they got to see kind of the benefits of all their hard work over the last couple of years to get to that point.
So, and then on the business side now, y'all have private label approval for the beef.
Yeah.
So how are y'all selling it? How are you getting the products out to the market?
We take deposits. It takes about, to finish a steer or a cow on grass, it takes about 30 months on average to really get them, to get the body condition where they're going to be tender and they have enough fat and things like that. So we take deposits and we give a timeline. We kind of know based on how old the animal is, about a 6-month window of when they're going to be ready. And then when they are ready, then we work out final payment and those types of things. We sell it in mostly right now in like a half of a cow or a whole cow.
Okay.
A lot of people buy a half. It's more economical. I think, for families that gives you enough meat for a year, or close to it. But we do some individual cuts periodically, and I think as we grow a little more, we want to get more into some of the individual cuts, but that requires a lot more freezer space and inventory, and so we've been pretty intentional about trying to just grow at the right pace,
So is this the full only supporting system for the family right now, or are y'all still having to do things outside of the farm?
Our primary support is outside of the farm jobs. I would love in the future to have this at a point where, that was supporting the family, but it's not quite there. But by being able to do that, it's allowing us to be really strategic and methodical. Right. It does take some of the pressure off of having to do this quickly, and I feel like so we can kind of think through our strategy and what we really want to do a little bit more. But it is every day, 7 days a week for the whole family.
And it's usually at the most inconvenient time.
Yeah.
I told one person, I was like, the most predictable thing about animals is their unpredictability.
Oh, absolutely.
And, an animal is going to get out when you're already 5 minutes late for some sporting event for the kids or, school or, something. That's when, it's going to go.
It's just when they decide to have a party in the backyard.
Yeah, that's when it's going to just all go crazy.
I've been late to countless classes at LSU because I had to chase a cow back in a pasture.
Yes.
Yeah, goats, pigs. Mm-hmm.
So we used to raise Nubian goats for milk.
Okay.
And I was an hour and a half late to my senior prom with my girlfriend, now wife. So obviously it wasn't the deal breaker. Yeah. Hour and a half late to prom because I had to milk the goats because you can't, if you milk them y'all know, you milk them too short in the window, you can't milk them, 10 hours, 9 hours apart. You got to have your close to 12 as best you can.
Yep.
And so I woke up at 4 o'clock that morning. I'm like, so I can get them milked early, so I can milk them early in the evening, and still was an hour and a half late to show up to her house for the party. And so she took pictures with her dad instead of me, and it was all of her friends were there. She was hosting the party before the prom. It was an experience. But it's to your point. You can't really plan perfectly everything that's going to go right with a farm, and sometimes stuff just happens.
Yes.
And it almost forces you to recognize that responsibility is not going to go away because you want it to go away.
That's right.
It's always going to be there.
Yes.
And it's not, you can't clock in and clock out on the farm.
Yeah.
They're just always on the clock
and
with everything.
Anything that you put off, it's going to come back around, and it's going to create more work for you if you don't address it at the time. So I talk about that a lot with my kids, is that you can't keep kicking the can down the road. And I always tell them, if you don't have time to do it right once, you definitely don't have time to do it twice,
Oh, 100%.
Thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Lake Men's Health Center with Our Lady of the Lake Physicians Group. Guys, I know it's tough to get out and go to the doctor. I know it's challenging to find time in our busy days, But I promise you, signing up to be a part of this group with Dr. Curtis Chastain and Dr. Tyler Boudreau, you won't regret it for several reasons, but most of those being the fact of the time it saves, where you're able to get in on the same day, get that appointment done, and spend that time you need to talk with them about what your health goals and concerns are, as well as ensuring that the financial investments you have, you will be able to live out and see those come to fruition. So if you're an investing guy, you know all about and planning for the future and investing in the future. There's no other more important thing to invest in than your health. Make sure you go check them out, Our Lady of the Lake Physicians Group Men's Health Center, and tell them Patty G sent you.
And so it's been good. I also pay attention and grant somebody with Fullness Farm that I've talked to a lot about this is just the weather. I never looked at the weather, predictions and stuff as much as I do now, because everything we do is based on, is it going to rain? What's the growing season? What's the temperature? And so it has made me more aware of, that endless cycle that goes on with weather and seasons and changes, and you have to flex and adapt based on, you kind of have to take whatever it's given you and be ready to roll with it.
Oh, yeah.
You can't plan it out exactly the way you want.
No, you can't. And when it's close to, when the mamas are going to drop and you see a big storm coming, you better just stay home.
Yep.
That was the first time I ever learned about barometric pressure dropping and it impacting. And sure enough, it was a big thunderstorm rolled in. And we had a goat walking back to the barn, and I look and I see this little white blob in this pasture. And I'm like, it's probably a baby goat.
I know.
That wasn't out there when I left. So then you just got to go out there and you got to deal with it,
She'll laugh at me because we'll be planning to plant a pasture like the next day or something, and I'll see like a rain cloud coming across, and I'll jump on the tractor and go out there and start putting seed out, trying to hit it just before the rain comes. And it's funny the things that it makes you do that you just have to respond to and go with it.
Oh, yeah. So on the rotation of the pastures, kind of give us a little glimpse into the why and the what for those that aren't necessarily aware of how that whole process works. I mean, I love that y'all do the full getting every animal on there, because every animal plays a different part with everything that they do.
This is your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I mean, there's different names for it. Like the generic term that a lot of people use is rotational grazing. And rotational grazing, I think for a lot of people is maybe you rotate them once a month or something like that. This is really more intensive, and to not get too nerdy on it, but I think in the farming world there's some controversy onto what to call it. But one term that it goes by, or one name that it goes by, is called multi-species grazing, and then multi-paddock adaptive grazing. And so there's kind of all these terms, but I think what they're trying to do is describe that, number one, it's not always a set schedule, so you're kind of adapting based on what the grass, what the forage is giving you, how the animal's body condition is doing. We're really trying to take care of the soil when it comes down to it. And the great thing about doing this and learning more about it and really getting into the science is that the food that we eat is greatly impacted by the soil that it was grown in, or that the animal ate the forage off of. There's a great book out there called What Your Food Ate, and it really kind of lays that out. And so all these phytonutrients and things that are crucial to human health, a lot of them don't show up on a nutrition label. So I think nutrition labels are good at showing us the macros and things like that, fat, carbs, and some of the big vitamins, but it doesn't show a lot of the phytonutrients, and there's not a good way to quantify it. That comes from soil health. In the soil, there's a lot more going on below the surface than what we see above, right? So there's bacteria, fungi, and all of these networks that are communicating. And so one of the reasons that we don't use pesticides and herbicides is because it disrupts all of the soil life going on beneath it. And so we basically take a completely holistic approach to it. We try to manage the forage mostly with the animals. So like different times of the season, depending on how fast the grass or the forage is growing, we'll move them at a different pace through there. But the one thing that's constant, especially with the cattle, is the cattle move every day. So most of the days they move multiple times a day. How much pasture we give them will be based on, what's out there and the quality of the forage. And then by doing that, they stimulate plant growth. The saliva from their bite on the grass actually stimulates root growth and plant growth. Those things stimulate bacteria and fungi in the soil. The roots get their nutrition from a symbiosis with the bacteria and fungi that are actually in the soil. And so when a cow eats a blade of grass, it stimulates something in the plant. The plant gives off some nutrients for the bacteria and fungi, and then they take the minerals and take that back up into the plant. That gets incorporated in the meat that we eat. And so there's this balance that's going on in nature, right? And I think it was designed that way. I don't think it's, any accident. So we're trying to harness that and really leverage that natural environment, right? The cow is designed to eat this grass and get nutrients from it that we never could. If we ate grass only, we would die. A cow can eat it and take all those nutrients and store them in their meat. So it's a really cool process. So you bring the cattle through there, you rotate them, you've stimulated things, they've fertilized the ground behind them. You move them every day because you're wanting to let them eat the plant, but not come back and keep re-nibbling the regrowth, which then stunts they'll eat everything down.
Yeah, if they're just in one little spot, they're going to eat it all down, and then you're going to end up with no growth whatsoever.
No growth. It really stunts the roots. And so you're really trying to always manage the root growth, which you can't see underground, but you can kind of tell based on how the plants are doing. And then you rotate through a different species. So when the pigs come through, they can eat forage as well. They're just going to, a lot of times, eat different forage than what the cattle did. Their fertilization is different than the cattle. So all the bacteria and fungi that are coming from them is a little bit different. And then the chickens come through and kind of do the same thing, right? And they eat all the bugs that are, growing in the different things. And so it's this kind of balance that already exists in nature. And really what we're trying to do is work within the ecosystem that's out there, recreate it as much as possible, not disrupt it as much as possible, and kind of manage. And so through doing that, we don't use synthetic fertilizers, we don't use weed killers. We don't spray for pests or anything like that because there's kind of a balance that's achieved. And if you really look at the science behind it, that pays off in the nutrients that come in the food. I think a lot of what we grow conventionally, and I've had these conversations with Grant at Fullness Farms, a lot of it is made or selected for volume, consistency, the ability to ship it across the country. But when you get those foods, their nutrient density is so low. I mean, a tomato that you get in the grocery store compared to one you get from Grant and Fullness Farms, the nutrient density is not even close. They're completely different foods. And so you see the same thing in meat and eggs, like we kind of talked about earlier. So we're pretty intentional about daily movements, especially with the cattle, because the cattle consume so much grass. So they're always on a fresh piece of forage, and then we let that rest behind them. It may be sometimes 60 days, it may be 180 days. It just kind of depends on what part of the year it is. And we're constantly going out there and assessing the pasture and making some changes based off of that. And so, that's kind of the overall kind of strategy behind the rotational aspect of what we do.
How are y'all monitoring all of that? Outside of just walking out there and looking at, you say you're into the science, and I can hear it, and you're very passionate about the science, which I love because it all goes into it to make a good end product.
Yeah.
So what's your monitoring process? What's your diagnosis process?
So we set up systems, and so when we first started, trial and error, right? People come out there and say, oh, it's set up so well. This is so intentional. Everything's got a reason. I'm like, well, yeah, I did it 30 ways the wrong way first,
We went through so many different types of fencing. And
yeah, I mean, at one point she's like, if you buy any more fencing posts or temporary reels, all these things we use, she's like, I'm going to lose my mind, I think she thought I lost my mind.
Experimenting.
Yeah, and I was like, and I would think about it for a month and I'd be like, all right, we're gonna switch it up. We're going to try this. So we're pretty settled on this method where a lot of what we do is using polywire. Okay. So polywire is kind of like electric line that has some metal filament in there, but it's more of a kind of a plastic. You can move it around so well.
It's very, very easy to work with.
It's white. The animals can see it. And it becomes kind of a behavioral thing where they know it's there and they really just don't mess with it. And even the pigs, we've went through all kinds of fencing with the pigs, and they get at it, everything. The polywire, you put a single line or two up, and they'll pretty much stay unless they have a big reason to move. They'll pretty much stay there. And so we have a system set up where we can go out there and within 2 minutes or 5 minutes, we can move the cattle. One person can do it. It's easier if we have two. We just installed this last year, and we have some really funny video clips because we installed water lines throughout the pasture. So we broke the pasture up into so the main pasture is a big open area. So instead of installing permanent fencing, we have posts throughout that's subdivided into paddocks, but it's just kind of like a single post, and then we run the poly wire just on the area that we need. So the rest of the pasture stays open. That way animals and critters and predators and everybody can kind of keep using that area like they were and not be fenced in or fenced off. And so we know we kind of move a certain distance. It's pretty easy to do. And then we use an app that's called, I think it's called Pasture Map or something. And you have your herd in there, and when you go out there, it uses the GPS, and you can click on it and say, okay, I moved them to this paddock today. And it keeps up with how many rest days that the rest of the pastures had.
That's cool.
And so sometimes when we make the rounds through the pasture, I'll look and I'll say, oh, this area only had 30 days of rest. And so I'll move them into a different area, that's been resting. So there's definitely, and there's science out there that you can look at that kind of can tell you. You can look at the plant height and the density. There, you can really get all into it. And there's people that, that's what they do all day, every day, is just really watch the science of the grass growing. And I think your cattle respond based on how you treat the soil and how you treat the grass. So you really have to think of yourself as you're really growing forage and contributing to the soil, and then everything else kind of benefits from it.
So are you doing testing on the cattle after the fact, like when they're harvested?
We do some testing. So, there's a lot of the types of testing that looks and measures like omega-6 to omega-3 ratios and things like that. It's pretty expensive to do. In the academic setting, there's been a lot done. And, if you look at a grass-finished cow, like a lot of people talk about red meat being inflammatory, which is actually not correct. If you look at the omega-6 to omega-3 profile of a grain-fed cow that you get anyway, grocery store, whatever, it has about 20 omega-6s to every omega-3, which is an inflammatory profile. So it is. But you look at like salmon and other things that are kind of anti-inflammatory, they have a more even ratio, 2-to-1 or 1-to-1. And a lot of the studies that have looked at grass-finished cattle, grass-finished beef, they have a 2-to-1 ratio. So instead of being 20-to-1, it's 2-to-1. So that's a huge difference in the anti-inflammatory profile of that meat. And so I think when we talk about, and you look at studies of red meat causing heart disease and things like that, you really need to look at the ones that stratify based on how the animal is raised, because that's what makes the difference. Yeah. But to go back to that, we can't really test like each animal we do for that. We do DNA testing on all of our cattle. It's kind of an extra step. You don't really have to do that, but it's available. And so what we're looking at specifically are traits of tenderness and marbling. And the reason being is that, cattle have a hard time getting as fat as you need them to be or want them to be just on grass, especially if you're trying to do it in a shorter time period. And that's always been kind of the hit against grass-finished beef, as it's leaner, and we're in America we're used to marbled steak and all that. So it is always different, and so if you get a grass-finished steak from us, it is going to be different than a grain-finished animal. They're not the same, but we raise specific breeds of cattle that are known to do well on grass, and then we go an extra step, and as part of our label, we got this approved by the state. We test every animal through our label for DNA testing on those traits. And if they don't score above average on their ability to have tenderness and marbling on grass, they don't get sold under the label. And so that's kind of a way that we're trying to stack the deck in the animal's favor and the customer's favor and get the most premium meat that we can. So we track that. We test our soil, periodically, sometimes once a year, sometimes a few times a year, to make sure that our mineral density and our mineral content's good. We don't use synthetic fertilizers and things like that, but it helps us to know, especially if we need to add lime or change the pH or something like that. We also, I believe a lot in like the mineral density and the nutrient density of the animal. So instead of just giving them mineral shots or just like a single salt block, we use buffet style minerals. And so there's some science and theory that animals can choose the mineral that they need. And so if your soil is deficient in a certain mineral, instead of just wrapping them all up into a single thing, you give them, about 12 or 15 that you basically order from a feed shop individually, and let the cattle choose what they need. And there's been some evidence that they know what the soil is deficient in, and they'll choose.
You can feel it in their body.
Yeah, and so they can. So then they add that mineral too. So there's a lot of things we do to try to optimize the health profile of the animal.
Welcome to the brand new Falia mobile app. We took all the same tech that's helped hundreds of people sell their homes themselves and packed it into an easy-to-use app for your phone. When you download the Falia mobile app on either the Apple or Android App Store, you'll immediately be able to see the power of this game-changing tool. From the seller's dashboard, you can navigate to all the information that you need. We intentionally separated everything into key groups, such as tasks to be completed, buyer leads for your listing, and contact information for everyone involved through closing. When you get an offer on your property, you can simply review and respond all within the app. No matter where you are in the world, you'll be able to monitor everything that's going on with your property from listed to sold. It's truly the power of Falia in the palm of your hand. Download the app and see for yourself. Falia, it's real estate reimagined.
So the cows are finished on your property and purchased from a neighboring farm.
Right.
Do they operate in the same way where it's grass finished, or are they different? And if they are different, have you compared the end products?
So, interestingly, we have a huge cow-calf operation adjacent to us.
Okay.
And the farm we're talking about, that is done really, really well. I mean, just top quality cattle, probably 1,000 head of cattle, big supply. We don't purchase from them because through our label and our grazing plan and how we do it, they're not really raised those first 6 months of their life the way that our cattle are. So, we kind of have a commitment that basically from birth to finish that this animal's going to be raised a certain way. It is hard to find cattle raised that way. I've been driving to Alabama and all over places to pick up calves that are the right, breed of cattle, number one, and then number two, have been raised purely in this type of environment. So actually that's kind of the bottleneck. You can only get so many of those calves every year, and it's tough. We do have plans in a couple of years. We have some family property where my great grandmother and great grandfather raised cattle, and so we have plans to expand there and probably start doing a cow-calf operation at that point.
Okay, that's what I was about to ask. At what point in time do you start doing the cow-calf process at home?
Yeah, it's coming for sure.
Yeah,
it's coming for sure.
It's in our...
Yeah, it's in the plan.
It's in sight.
Yeah. More cattle that she'll get to chase around when they get out.
You're the cattle wrangler?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it never fails. I get home, like during the school year, he leaves for work, and I take the kids to school, and I come back, and there has been numerous of times where I drive up, and there are 12 head of cattle in our backyard, not in the pasture, and I'm by myself. And that's always, I tell him, that's when I need the drone, because that is hilarious, because I really don't know what I'm doing, and I'll call Pete, our neighbor. I'm like, Mr. Pete, I need some help, or, trying to get these cattle back in the pasture, So yeah, I've been the pig wrangler, the goat wrangler, and it's usually when I'm by myself, and it's quite comical.
Yeah, you need like a camera strapped to you, looking at your face, getting your reactions, and then one facing out.
Yes, and this particular instance where they were out there, our cows, when we finish them, we like to use alfalfa, and so we get these alfalfa cubes, and they will eat it out of our hands, and so I was trying to lure 12 head of cattle back into the pasture
alfalfa block.
With alfalfa block. This is hilarious. This would make great YouTube content. I just can't do that and operate a drone.
We got to get the drone that just follows you.
Yes, and then me learning how to use it is another process in and of itself. But
yeah, there's so many things that happen just on a regular basis that when we talk about them later, gosh, people would probably find this hilarious if they were able to watch it, happen in real time. Mm-hmm. But you never really know when it's coming.
You don't know when it's coming at all.
Well, and that's Amazon has done I think, an okay job with Clarkson's Farm. So have y'all heard of it?
No.
So Amazon Prime has a show, Clarkson's Farm. It's with Jeremy Clarkson. He is a Top Gear host back in the day in the UK, and he hosts UK's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Yep.
And so he's been a TV show host for all this time, and he's got all this pasture land and farm out in UK. And it's literally Amazon going there and just filming him doing all of his farming things. And so he's got cows, he's got pigs, and he's got a farm shop that he sells everything in. He's had a restaurant, but then the whole place was all against him, and so on and so forth. It's just now he's on season 4 of his show, and it's literally just him doing farm life and them filming everything. And of course, he's a TV show host, so he knows how to. Hey, make sure you're here for this day. We're gonna have some birthing, but they set up cameras at night so they can watch like the little piglets give birth and everything, and be a part of it. And
that is cool.
It's interesting to follow and see his journey through that, because he knew nothing at all.
Yeah.
And all of his failures and just pastures, and they did some cross planting and stuff, and people love that, and it's a great little show that y'all could have a Willow Creek farm show here in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, we just have to figure out how to set up cameras 24/7.
Yeah, our daughters are constantly
and then get a good editor.
Dad, we should put this on YouTube. I do think you talked about, so he didn't know about farming, and I think that's what's been really cool is like the information age. And like we could have 20 years ago we couldn't do it as rapidly as we are now, or learn the way we did, because there's so much like data and information out there, and you can read so much, you can talk to so many people, and you can learn from other people's mistakes quite a bit. And so I think that's like sped up the process for us. I also think that there is something missing from our modern lives. I think I think about my great grandmother a lot, because she grew up in this rural area with cattle, but that was kind of normal back then. And so they had this, life where, she woke up in the morning, she picked vegetables out of her garden, and that's what they ate. And they ate eggs from her chickens and beef from her cows. And so that was kind of the normal thing 100 years ago. And nowadays, like, we're completely detached from nature. We're completely detached from our food source, and before we started doing this, I was the worst offender, right? You're trying to get something convenient, and you just really, you are detached from what it comes from, and not really having that appreciation from what went into it, and then not really thinking about how that affects your body and all. And if you look at people's health 100 years ago, and probably up to the 60s or 70s, America was a lot healthier, in many ways. And I believe a lot of that comes from the shift in food sources, and industrialization of food. And I was probably the first person that would laugh at that idea 5 years ago. But really digging into the science and looking at those things objectively has I've done a 180, and so we probably, as a society, if we could find a way to get more connected, back probably like our grandparents and great-grandparents were, it'd probably be better for everybody.
Yeah, and I think it's through folks like y'all that have these kind of micro farms that aren't producing on mass scales can kind of start to help to be a part of that solution, right? And be able to offer, your own label beef, and be able to offer your pork and everything of that nature that you're harvesting at the farm, and you can know where it's at. It's just a matter of how do we get it out there, because you're doing it in that way, it's not going to be sustainable for the whole state. So it's like, then you run into that issue, and you're like, well, now I understand why we do all these things, but it's like, how can we have enough of those around to maybe start sustaining little communities at a time, where it's this whole community where you move in, all right, where's the grocery store? Oh, well, you go get eggs at this person's house, you go get milk over at this person's house, and then it starts becoming this big community. And we essentially were doing a variation of that all while I was at, in high school and in middle school. I was bringing milk and eggs and everything to people and selling them. And we were trading rabbit meat for, beef and everything of that nature. And it was fun to do it. And it also was very rewarding to be like, you've helped create this product that we're not going to be able to consume, and it's delicious.
Yes.
I think you're right about it's not scalable to do it that way, right? And that's one reason it kind of went away, because we went this way as a society that everything's got to be scalable and consistent and mass produced and global, which there's a lot of awesome things that have come out of that. But I think for our food sources and maybe some of our daily lives, there's been some negative impacts to that too. And the farmer that owns White Oak Pastures, I can't remember his name.
Will Harris.
Will Harris. So Will Harris So we went and stayed, and I would encourage everybody to look up White Oak Pastures. And, he's written a book, and he's got a lot of stuff on the internet. But, he was a conventional cattle farmer for generations. He's the 6th generation, and he does it on a massive scale. I think he has 3,000 head of cattle. We went and stayed out there last summer to kind of learn and see how they did things. But he talks about that a lot. He says, hey, this is probably the biggest that we can do this. He sells his chicken and his beef to Delta Airlines, and and was in the first grass finished beef ever in Whole Foods was from his farm.
Oh, wow.
So he's done it at scale, but he talks a lot about this is probably about as big as you could get, and he still can't get some of the contracts that he wants because people, these big buyers, they just need something that he can't provide at his scale as big as he is. But he talks about that a lot and told the group that was kind of touring through is that really you ought to take this back into your communities, which is what he just said, because this can be done really well on a small scale. And so that was kind of his encouragement. And I've heard other people talk about that too. And I think you nailed it, is that, a smaller farm, a micro farm in a community environment can do that a lot better than a big chain can,
Yeah, and it's recognizing that you can't have every animal at your farm.
Right.
So who's going to be the pig farmer, who's going to be the cow farmer, the goat farmer, and so on and so forth. And then together you can have this community effect.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you can't, your one farm can't produce enough for the city of Baton Rouge.
Right.
And so it's like you've got to get more farms. But to your point about the consistency, and Grant talks a lot about this, and I know he did when we spoke, was people have become accustomed to going to the store and getting the exact same product year-round.
Yeah.
And he's like, at fullness, we're seasonal. You're going to get this product in this time of year because that's when it grows.
Yeah.
We're not going to go beyond and make this product grow year-round. Like, it's going to be whatever is the time of year, and that's what we're going to have to offer.
Yeah.
And so it's like now you're having to change people's mindsets and say, well, no, you can't have what you want every time of year, which we already do that to a degree, right, with crawfish. We understand there's a season for crawfish, but how do we get that translated to vegetables and other products that are inconsistent throughout the year? And that, I think, is the bigger picture shift that people have to be okay with before we can even begin to say, all right, now we're going to do everything that's sourced locally, because then it's getting them accepting of, I can't get that cut of beef every time. There's only so much of a tenderloin on a cow before you run out, and we got to start exploring more cuts.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you're going to have to wait for 12 to 24 months to get this next cow. Like, you got to space it out, and that's that mindset shift that has to occur.
Yeah, it's actually an amazing thing though to buy like vegetables and shares from Fullness Farm, because you think like we're in an immediate gratification culture, and so we're used to pulling in and drive through and ordering exactly what we want every time. Well, the first time we were looking at Grant, at their menu, I'm like, oh wait, so we because you don't have that choice, right? You buy a share and you get what's seasonal. It's been an amazing experience though, because it takes that burden off you, number one. Number two is I eat a lot of vegetables that I wouldn't have chosen otherwise, because that's what is being grown right now, and they're awesome. And I never would have probably been exposed to them if we hadn't have done it that way. And then I think there's a lot from a health standpoint and that seasonality of it as well. And like crawfish is a great example. We know how to wait for crawfish, or for people that hunt, you have a season where you can have venison and things like that. And so, it's been really cool to use that model as one of their customers, to order from them and know that you don't really have to think about which vegetable am I going to pick or what, it's coming with whatever that they raised. I also think, so consistency is part of it, and also efficiency. And so a company can make a lot more money if they can grow 20 million tomatoes that are all the same size, within a very small tolerance, because then they know exactly the size of the packaging. It's more efficient because they're doing it at such a broad scale, so then we have cheaper food. And so then you get these huge farms that are growing tens of millions of tomatoes, but that's all they do. So they don't have any bug life there because they have to spray all the pests, because they don't have other plants or beneficial species that are helping their tomatoes grow, which means they're spraying everything, and they don't have animals out there. So now they have to have fertilizer. So they're buying fertilizer and they're putting that in the ground so the tomato will grow. And then they have to raise a different species of tomato because they need it to grow well with fertilizer into this certain size. And then you're getting a tomato that is not nutritionally dense. It looks like a tomato and somewhat tastes like a tomato, but it's not the same as you get from Grant or from your own garden with these heirloom varieties. And so there's a difference there, but also efficiency it's not very resilient. So we talk a lot in society like efficiency, scale, bigger, faster, more profit from it and all that. But we saw what happened during COVID with the meat packers. When you're scaled and you're super efficient, you have zero resilience at that point. So there's a few, 3 companies that own the meat packing plants. They get shut down. There's a huge, bottleneck in the supply. And so with these micro farms, and think about like the avian influenza, the bird flu and all those different things, those kind of come from these mass, very efficient farms that you don't see that on a small scale. And yeah, your chickens may have a virus, but they're also surrounded by pigs, and pigs don't get affected by that virus. And so there's this kind of balance that happens. And I just think it makes our food source more resilient. It's just that it can't be, you have to almost do it family to family to some degree. You can't make it huge, and you can't scale it like you can conventional agriculture.
And that's kind of why it went away ultimately.
Yeah.
Is because people started living denser in your communities, building cities, and then now you can't have enough space to do everything. I mean, because I don't know how many acres you operate off of.
25.
So you operate off of 25 acres, and how much do you think more you can grow before you cap out on the space?
So, I think we probably could with the methods that we're doing. I think we still have, we have some excess capability that we're probably not utilizing. But if we compare ourselves to like some of the conventional cattle farms around us, we're small beans compared to what they're doing. And so, yeah, we can expand a little bit. But if we got too much bigger, we couldn't do what we do and move the cattle every day. And so then you run into those kind of hiccups, and then you can't rotate the pigs through. And then what do you do with all the chickens? And so, I think there's a finite limit. I think Will Harris at White Oak Pastures was very interesting because he has figured out a way to still do some of those things on a very large scale, but he also has a huge team, and he talks about actually when they were, before he was doing conventional cattle prior to this, and he just had a change of heart and just switched. So prior to that, he didn't have very many employees. He had still, tens of thousands of acres, however many acres he has, but he didn't have that many employees. Now he has hundreds of employees, less machinery, but lots of people. And it basically keeps this whole small town of Georgia employed. So the town was a dying town until he went back to the old ways of farming. And now you've got a ton of people living there compared to what you had 20 years ago. But it's people out there moving the animals. And
it's really cool. He's got a really sweet operation.
Yeah.
It's sweet. He's got a restaurant there and a store, and he has his abattoir on site where they, kill and process the animals right there. And we stayed in a little 2-bedroom cabin right on by a pond, so the kids could, they had canoes. They would canoe in the pond, and we took a horseback tour through their farm, and it was really sweet. It was like going back in time.
When talking about the soil, so he brings out soil from his farm where he's been doing it this way for maybe 20, 30 years. So it's been a while. It's been a few decades. And then he brings soil from a portion of the farm or a neighboring farm that's been continued to be conventional agriculture, which is like fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, same thing every year. And they're 2 completely different soils. Mm-hmm. And so you look at the soil that he has been building on his farm for the last 20 or 30 years, and it's very rich, dark. I mean, just looks like that topsoil that you see in the Midwest. I mean, it's just beautiful. But the same farm across the fence that's just doing it conventional is bare. I mean, you can tell there's not nutrients or life or anything like that in that soil, and it's crazy to see that. And then if you really look in the science of that and how that translates into the foods we eat, it's something else too. And so he has managed to scale it, but I think he has also, through that, demonstrated it's difficult to scale, and it probably works better with everybody doing it in their community.
Yeah. Getting to scale is the hardest part.
Yeah.
Because then he's got to pay all those people's salaries,
Yeah.
and then it gets pricey, and then he's got to charge more, and then if you're supporting that
Yeah.
local economy, it's like you can't charge them for more than you're paying them because then you've
Yeah.
got no customer base.
Yes.
Right.
So it gets tough.
Yeah. And he talks about that a lot. The margins are thin.
He talks about that in the book a lot.
And he kind of acknowledges this isn't the best way for him to make as much money as he can from the farm. but he is so bought in and believes in it for his family and his legacy and the community. And so that's the other thing too, is like the incentives are probably a little bit off in terms of, you know, how large scale farming can do from an economic standpoint compared to something smaller scale that takes a lot of time and effort into it. You know, and we've had multiple people tell us, like, you know, you can't raise cattle the way that you're wanting to do them. You've got to spray your pastures. You've got to do those things, which I get, and I always appreciate that kind of expertise and advice from people. But at the point being is that you can't scale as quickly if you're not using chemicals or you're not using some of these mass production techniques. And so we've just chosen, and we're fortunate to be able to do this way, to try to do it the old school way and be a little bit smaller and slower with it, you know?
Yeah, and I love it. What y'all are doing is great, and I'm excited to see it grow and continue growing.
Yeah.
This episode is proudly presented by Gage. Gage is a local company here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. For over 40 years, Gage has provided businesses with the very best telecommunications, IT, and standby power services available. Gage has a variety of services, including Gage Cloud Voice. It is the last phone system your business will ever need. You need to give your business the ability to be accessible anytime, anywhere, and with Gage's cloud-based phone system, you'll be able to accomplish just that. Not only do they have Gage Cloud Voice, they have fully managed IT services that are proactive network monitoring, 24/7, 365, help desk, business continuity. They are there for you. What you're also going to need is some cybersecurity. Gage is there to safeguard your business from potential cyber threats, even when you aren't aware they exist. Gage also is power and leaders in standby generators. They are the #1 Cummins dealer on the Gulf Coast and provide generators to homes and businesses of any size so you can keep life going. Gage, better connected, a proud sponsor of the Patty G Show.
Thank you.
So
Yes, thank you.
before we get you out of here, we have a set list of questions we ask every
Yeah.
guest.
Okay.
So the first one being, what is something y'all did as a kid you wish you could still do today?
You want to go first?
You go first.
You know, just run around barefoot and play. I would just wish I just had more time to just carefree, just play. You know, like there's something to be said for that. And I love watching our kids get to do that, but that goes away, you know.
Responsibility starts stepping in, and you got other things you got to do outside the house.
Yeah, for me, I would say spend more time with my grandfather. I mean, very similar, being a kid and running around outside, and you know, you don't get that grandpa time back. So,
Yeah. What are 3 lessons y'all have learned along the way?
lots of how not to do things.
Yes. And for me, to let go of a schedule. Like, I am very much like, sometimes I overschedule myself in a day. And the animals and the farm life, we talked about that a little bit, has taught me to, like, let go of the reins a little bit, give myself more time than I need between things, and really learn how to be present. I'm not good at being in the present. I'm always thinking of the next thing on my to-do list. And so I think those are some big things that the farm has taught me since we've started.
Yeah, I think very similar to you. I think that learning to be at peace with not having every project done. I think when we first started this, I very much had this task list in my head that I was like, we have to get this, and this done. And what I've learned is that there's always work to be done on the farm, And so, you talked about being present, but for me too, being able to go out there and enjoy it. And sometimes you just look around and you see this cattle just grazing in the pasture, and they're so peaceful, and you're just hearing the chomping sound. And, it's easy to go out there and just see, oh, I need to repair this fence, or I need to put this up, or there's so many things that you just kind of lose sight of why you're doing it. And if you stop, slow down, look around, listen to the sounds, It's an amazing thing. It just revitalizes you. And it's what I think we miss a lot out of modern life is that connection. I think that's been probably the big one. And the other big one that I probably speak for you as well is just an understanding of how all these things affect our lives and our human health. I really wasn't a big believer in like food as medicine and those types of things necessarily from a nutritional standpoint until the data just hit me in the face, you know? And so I think understanding how soil health and animal health and all of these things play into, you know, inflammation in the body and longevity and cancer and those types of things that have been kind of, I guess, game changer for me.
So what is something y'all love about Baton Rouge?
Baton Rouge, I mean, I'm not originally from Baton Rouge, but this is the city that I came into adulthood, like, and so for me, it's where I learned and found who I am, and so that has just a very special place in my heart. There's always going to be a little Ville Platte in me, but you know, I really found who I was and found my way and found friends that are still in my life, you know, today, and that's just very special. And we've moved around a lot of different places, and it just, Baton Rouge is home, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would second that. It's home. You know, I think my favorite thing is the people. We've lived all over the country. You come back, you know, 10 years later, and you go in a grocery store and you see all these people that you knew. It's a big, small town, you know, and I think the people are the best thing about it.
Oh yeah, it's a little big town that makes up Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for the final question, what can I do to help y'all?
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, keep getting the word out, right? And farms like Fullness Farm, and there's lots of places that are doing the same thing. I think bringing awareness to that, it's all over our community. If you start talking to people, there's actually lots of places that are doing things similar to what we're doing. And I think that as that awareness grows, that benefits the community, it benefits the farms and the city, you know. So I think just keep getting that word out.
Sounds like I need to connect with y'all and get some names, some people that can come on the show. I don't know everybody, so more people we can get on, the better. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank y'all so much for coming on today. I really appreciate y'all's time and willingness to share your journey. It's been very eye-opening, and I love the science geeking out and everything over here, so that was fun.
Guilty.
Yeah, I love it. So what is, if people are further interested, how can they get a hold of you? What's the best way? If they want to buy some of your products, when, where, how, all that.
Yes, the best place to buy meat products is on our website, willowcreekranchbr.com. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook, same handle, Willow Creek Ranch BR. Eggs, they are listed for sale on the website, but I prefer people to either message me through Instagram, and then that way I have little pockets that I deliver to weekly, so it helps me figure out, well, how can I weave you into my route? So I would say that. Do you need to add to anything?
No, I think that's perfect, you know.
Willow Creek Ranch BR.
Yeah.
Got it. We'll link up the website and the social handles in the show notes as well. Make sure people can easily click and find y'all.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
This was good.
Thanks for having us.
Yes,
It's been a blast.
thank you
Really
so
cool
much.
to talk about it.
Absolutely.
So.
Thank y'all for coming on. I really appreciate it. You know, and for everybody listening or watching, if y'all are interested more in Willow Creek Ranch, check out the show notes and go check out their setup. Like, it's just fascinating what they're doing and how they're accomplishing it right here in Baton Rouge. I love it, and I'm definitely gonna continuing following y'all's journey. So thank y'all so much for coming on, and thank you everybody else for listening or watching. This is the latest episode of the Patty G Show, and we're out.